Okay, thank you very much. As I have explained before, we are dealing with the politics of Jesus, and we have looked at different images which really turn upside down what we normally think of the humble, pious Jesus. That Jesus was actually a very revolutionary figure. But before we move into our next clip, where we are going to talk about two responses that Jesus invites us to do, I would like to hear from somebody who has an insight on one of the paradoxes about the person of Jesus himself.
Well, when I was thinking about it, so Jesus is introduced into the world. He said he's going to be the Lamb of God, the Son of God, the Messiah, King of the Jews. But he's born as a baby, and babies are helpless. They can't do anything for themselves. He's completely reliant on kind of the work of other people. So him in himself is a paradox, because he's meant to be this amazing person that's going to help us and save us, but he can't do anything.
Fantastic. I think that's a good way of looking at the whole idea of paradox, that we in the world have a certain idea. If we are told a king is to be born, we know exactly where to expect a king to be born. We do not expect a king to be born in a manger, next to the cows and sheep and other things. So that in itself already challenges the ideas we have about Messiah, about kingship, and about the kind of person Jesus was. So let's move on now and look at two ways in which Jesus challenges us to respond to his politics. The first one is a passage that you are very familiar with. It's from Matthew chapter 5. Again, you have it in your handout. This is where Jesus says, "You have heard it said before, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, what should you do?"
Turn the other cheek.
You should turn the other cheek. But have you ever thought about just the phrasing itself, why it says, if anyone strikes you on the right cheek? Matthew doesn't say if anybody strikes you on the cheek. I know Luke does, but Matthew says on the right cheek. Now just think for a moment. If you are going to strike somebody on the right cheek, I don't say you should strike them, but just try to imagine.
You're left-handed.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. You need to be either left-handed
Or do it on your backhand.
on the back. Now, now you'll be very surprised at this insight, and it will absolutely blow your mind with regard to this.
Okay.
So in order to hit somebody on the right cheek, you either hit them with the left or with the backhand. Now in 1st century Mediterranean, you did not hit somebody who was equal to you with the left hand or with the backhand. You did that with children and with women.
No.
So, if I challenge you and say, if somebody hits you on the right cheek, offer them the other hand, what am I saying? Or what is Jesus saying?
You're equal to them.
You are equal to them. Yes.
So you've got the right to be hit on the left side.
That's right. Yeah. Mind you, you might even be hit.
Even if you
But
don't want to.
Even if
But
you
you're
don't want,
equal, that's all that matters.
that's what matters. You are equal. So for me, one of the ways to interpret that passage is to say, Jesus is actually challenging us that however you are treated, do not allow to be treated less than you are. That you must be treated as an equal person. Jesus also uses another imagery about if somebody asks you to go 1 mile to help them, go with them the next one. Again, it's a very challenging one. It is about soldiers at that time who were allowed by law to ask anyone to carry their luggage for 1 mile. They were only allowed for 1 mile. So, if you say, I'm going to do a 2nd mile, what are you implying?
wants to do more.
Yeah, you're stronger than
Stronger than
But what's going to happen to this guy who is not allowed to ask for more than 1 mile?
He's gonna get
into trouble. So Jesus is not simply saying, do the extra. He says, listen, if the law says you can help them with 1 mile, help them with 1 mile. But go the extra mile. Get them into trouble. He was actually. And they would have got into a lot of trouble with their superiors. Very quickly, let's get on to the next one about obedience to the civil law, which is a favorite passage of mine. And any opportunity I get to share about this. You know the passage from Romans chapter 13. Let every person be subject to the ruling authorities. Let every person be subject to the ruling authorities. Now, when you read this passage, what sort of question comes to mind? Well, what sort of objections might you raise as a reader of the Bible? Let every person be subject to the ruling authorities.
What authority? Like when? Whose authority at the time?
Okay, but also, suppose you come from, say, I don't know, Syria, or from Egypt, or from Zimbabwe.
Everybody follows the same rules.
Yes, but also there are some quite nasty authorities. So what does this passage say?
Everyone's treated as equal with the same rulings. Everyone should be.
Everyone should obey, even the authorities that are, let's say, dictatorial or otherwise. So that's a very worrying passage for a lot of people, and they have used it. So is Paul, asking us to say, whatever happens, however the government behaves, your duty is to obey. Now, I'm suggesting in the next slide, which I'll put there, and I'll just read them and see what you think of them. My suggestion is that when you read the text very closely in chapter 13, you will discover that at least 4 important things are being dealt with here. The first thing is that Paul is actually not advising unqualified support to any authority. In my view, people have mistranslated that passage. I think Paul is saying, let every person be subordinate, take the rightful place. Because the Greek verb that is used is not the ordinary word for being obedient. It's being subordinate, taking your rightful place. Then the word that has been described as, or translated as governing authorities or ruling authorities, in my opinion, the word means to excel, to do better. So let them be subordinate to those authorities that try to do the best for the common good. In my view, if a state doesn't do that, it forfeits its right to our subordination or obedience. I'll just point out the last part, which is a bit problematic, where he asks the people to pay taxes, and he says they are God's servants. It doesn't say who they are. Most people think it's the authorities. I think it's the Christians. The Christians who pay taxes are using this as a form of cultic self-sacrifice. So that's the way I would understand it. We will have a look at the last clip and sum up our discussions. Thank you very much.